Well, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon or evening, depending on what part of the country you're logging in from. We are so excited to have you join us today. I'm Dr. Tony Farrell, the Department Chair for the Department of Education and Liberal Arts here at Ashford University. The faculty and staff of the Department of Education and Liberal Arts wish to welcome you to the first session of this 8-part webinar series, The Dog Ate My Mask, Schooling and Parenting During a Pandemic. So we recognize that each family may have different circumstances when supporting children during the school year. Schools may be open for instruction and then have them close immediately. We saw this week in Georgia. Some schools and districts may be online for the entire school year. As such, we recognize that not everyone's experience will be the same during the school year. Many families have limited technology options available to them as well. It is estimated that over 6 million students will not have the appropriate technology to start the year. So as we see this digital divide and equity issues for children in America, our goal is to offer as many suggestions and resources as possible to help provide the best experience for all of our kids. So during the course of this webinar series, our presenters will be learning right along with you. So there's no manual, there's no playbook for what's happening in education today. As you can see by this slide, our team has kids who are experiencing this unique learning environment as well. So personally, I have 4 kids ranging from a freshman in college all the way to a 3rd grader. And in reflecting back on last year, each of my kids had an entirely different experience at the end of the last school year. And so I can only imagine that many of you have had different experiences even within your own home. So at this point, I'd like to bring our presenters on to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessie Harkins. I am a lead faculty member in the Department of Education and Liberal Arts, focusing on the graduate program, the Master of Arts in Special Education. I'm happy to be here today.
Welcome to the first session. I'm Dr. Denise Maxwell, the lead faculty for the Masters of Education in the Department of Education and Liberal Arts.
Hey, I'm Dr. Allison Reef. I'm the lead faculty for our ECE programs. And yes, my dog ate my son's face mask twice now, so we're on a roll.
And I'm Jen Zauer. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Education and Liberal Arts and work within the early childhood development and child development programs.
Thanks, team. And as you can see by the quotes there on the side, these are all actual quotes from either kids or those that we know in our households are responding to what it's like to learn in this new online learning environment. And this, these presenters, we're so fortunate to have them here with us today. They all have tremendous experience in education, both in a traditional classroom and in online education. And so they're excited to share their recommendations and strategies to start the school year off in a positive way. So as a team, we really believe that our first webinar should set the foundation for starting the year off in the best way possible. Having an organized workspace and a workable schedule from day one will allow all of our kids to have a sense of normalcy during this, and I think we can say, abnormal school year. So a few reminders before we start today's webinar. First, the chat's going to remain open during the webinar. If you have any questions, Dr. Maxwell and the Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Lafferty, will respond in the chat or will bring them forward at the end of the session. And at the end of the session, there will be time for any additional questions. We'll make sure that we have time to respond to questions at the end of the seminar. And then finally, there will be a survey sent out to you at the end of today's webinar, and will also be posted in the chat. And I really encourage you guys, once you're done with the webinar today, to fill out that survey. We're going to use all of the feedback from the survey to either answer any lingering questions or to improve future sessions of this webinar. So at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Reef, and she's going to share with us multiple models of instruction that our kids are experiencing this year. Dr. Reef?
Thank you. So about 1.2 billion children in 186 countries have been affected by school closures due to the pandemic. And that data was from the end of the 2019-2020 school year. With those closures come lots of new options that may all sound rather similar. So we're here to point out some key distinctions. If you want to revisit this, it will be included in our resources section, which will be shared at the end of the webinar. So first we have classroom learning. That's traditional school learning with in-person learning happening for the school day. Then you have hybrid classroom learning, which combines in-person partial day learning with asynchronous learning. Many schools are doing this as a way to create social distancing in smaller class sizes. Kids can come for half a day or a limited time, which is typically what we do for younger kids, or every other day, perhaps what is done in middle school and high school. There's also synchronous distance learning. This takes place at the same time, but different location. Students and teachers are logged in together and learning is happening live. They may be using things like Google Chats, GoToMeeting, Zoom, Canvas Classroom, Google Classroom, or other technology to bring learning to the students. There's also asynchronous distance learning. Students and teachers are not interacting in real time, but learning happens at their own pace and time. Teachers utilize webinars, lectures, pre-recorded elements that may be created by teachers or put together by teachers, or they may include computer-generated programs that the teachers assign but don't create themselves. There's also hybrid distance learning. This combines synchronous and asynchronous learning where learners meet with a teacher virtually at specific times and also have work to complete on their own time and pace. This is also sometimes called blended learning. And then our last option is learning pods or micro schools. These terms are often used interchangeably and can vary depending on location. The concepts are similar. Families combine together to have their kids rotate from house to house. Either a teacher or a parent provides the instruction. The instruction may be based on a distance learning plan, or it could be self-generated. It may be based on kids being enrolled in a school or in a homeschooling network. When the parents provide the instruction, it is sort of like a co-op, where the parents take turns teaching. This allows them to be the teacher for one day, but be relieved of the responsibilities on the other days of the rotation. We wanted to share the different types of models so you would be knowledgeable about them. But keep in mind that anything and everything is subject to change. There are no guarantees that what you start out with will remain consistent. You may start out with traditional classroom learning and then transition into a blended hybrid learning plan with extra precautions, and then go to a fully synchronous distance learning. Things are iffy to say the least, a tad bit messy, and require our solutions to be fluid. My kids' district surveyed parents for what they wanted, resurveyed them again, and before the second survey was completed, changed the options and offered to resurvey for a third time. I know that the change and instability is hard. It's one of the hardest pieces for me to handle. I like order and predictability. But we have to embrace that this is just where we are at the moment. There are definitely things that can be done to ease their transitions. Talk to your kids about the plan and the various options that could happen in the future. We are going to get into some of these techniques later in today's session and in future sessions. Now that we've talked about the models, Jen is going to share how you can set up some learning spaces.
Thanks, Dr. Reef. So I wanted to start today with a story. I have 4 kids who are in 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade, and we actually started remote learning on July 27th. So we're in our 3rd week. And to add to this, my husband, who teaches elementary band, is also teaching from home. So we knew as educators that it was really important for us to be prepared and have our organized workspaces. And we made sure that the night before the first day, we had everything set up. Everyone had their space. They had the supplies they needed. We had our color-coded schedules. We were ready to go. Well, on the first morning, I peeked my head in my son's room and I saw him laying on the floor, wrapped up in a blanket while participating in his live session. So when his session was done, I went in and said, "Hey buddy, were you more comfortable on the floor?" And he said, "No, Mom, my chair was too squeaky." So that night we switched the folding chair that he had in his room at his desk with a chair from the kitchen table. Next day, same thing. I peek in his room, he's laying on the floor learning. And I said, "Bradley, what was it about the kitchen chair?" And he said, "Mom, that chair was too hard." So that night we said, "Okay, you can try the office chair, my comfy office chair." And sure enough, that chair was just right. So you might be wondering, well, why am I telling you this story? Well, for two reasons. One, because just like many of you, I am navigating remote learning for the first time, but it's also a really good example of why when you're organizing your learning environment, you want to allow for flexibility and choice. So when we look at the research, there's some research from Schuerman and Weber and also from Bullard that says when we have an organized learning environment, it provides children with the visual cues, the structure, and the expectations for success. Many people would then say that this makes it the key to success because the environment that we create is what's going to set the tone for the learning that's taking place. Now, I don't know about many of you, but I know that my 4 kids are definitely opinionated. They want to feel like they have a say and they chime in whenever they get the chance. However, my kids, just like a lot of yours, don't really have a say in what's happening with their current plan for school this year. But we did feel like we could give them a choice when it came to their workspace. We know that it's important for workspaces to meet the needs of your kiddos and that they're going to look different based on the age of the kids that are using them. And even you have to find a space if you're working at home to create a workstation for yourself as well. So you might have kids that need their workstation to be in a quiet room. Maybe it's so their 2-year-old sister doesn't make a cameo on Zoom, or maybe you have a child who will do better just because they're sitting next to you, not necessarily because they need the help, but maybe they just need the reassurance or like to know that you're close by. Or as Jessie will share with us later today, your child might need a flexible workspace with something like an exercise ball as a chair. When you focus on the needs of your child, then you can work together to create a space that meets those needs. And it's important too to remember that setting up a workspace is not all about the location either, but it can also be about the aesthetics of the space you're creating. So on the slide, I snapped a picture of my girls' workstations, and you can see they're the 2 on the bottom. You can see they look really different. One is a minimalist. She wants a clean workspace. She doesn't want any of her stuff out if she's not using it. She just likes to have it all put away in her drawers. The other one doesn't mind having her things all over the place. And maybe that's the difference between them being 8 and 12. Who knows? But what was important is that they had a choice in creating the workspace that was going to give them ownership over the space that they were using. When we're talking about setting up for success, we can't just talk about what our workstations look like, but we also want to think about the supplies that we need handy. Remember, we don't want their crayons in their lunchbox. We want to have their supplies ready and organized so that children feel ready to learn. This also helps to foster independence, and it can save you from that text in the middle of your meeting asking you where the highlighters are. When you're thinking about supplies, there's a few things to keep in mind. First, think about what school supplies can you have at the ready for your child to be able to do their work. And we know that there are different resources available throughout communities. Many schools are providing needed supplies, or there's always my kid's favorite, which is the dollar store when you need something. You also want to think about what technology is my child going to need. Again, we know that many schools are providing these resources and that families have different levels of need when it comes to being able to have technology accessible. And later on today, Dr. Reif is going to share a little bit more about some resources that we have if you're in need of technology. You also want to think about, can my kids access the supplies they need? Are they in a basket or a place where the kids can get them when they need them? We want to think too about things even beyond school supplies, such as, does my child need a sensory ball? Maybe they're wiggly. Maybe they need a stress ball that they can squeeze in their hand to help them stay focused while they're working. And then, just like how we prepare our kids when they go to school with a snack and a water bottle so that they have those things when they need them, we want to think about how we can prepare our kids with those supplies too and have them in their workspaces. And even when we think we are as prepared as we can be, just like when I shared the story with you of my son finding his chair that was just right, we know that even when we've created what we think of as that perfect workspace, it might not be. So once you have your workstation and your supplies, give them a try. This is a really great opportunity to allow your kids to connect with their friends or grandparents or others that they've been missing. So think of, you can set up a Zoom, you can use Duo, you can use all kinds of different apps to give you the opportunity to practice those video calls. When you're doing your test run, these are some key things to consider. Is the lighting okay? Are you too dark on the screen? Is it too washed out? Can you see your child? Are they too low or too high? If you look in the picture, when we were doing a test run, we realized that my first grader, that she was too low when the screen was on. You couldn't see anything but, the top of her head and her forehead. So we went out to the car, we grabbed her booster seat, and we stuck it on the chair, and problem solved. You also want to think about the sound. Is it too loud? Is it too high? Does your child need headphones? Can they focus and listen better if they have those headphones coming with the sound? And then finally, we want to make sure that we think about what does it look like behind you when your camera's on? You might not want everybody to see that 2-week-old pile of laundry in the background that you just haven't gotten to yet. Okay, so we've talked about our workstation, we've talked about having our supplies, and the other thing that we really want to think about to get organized to help our year go smoothly is to have a schedule. And I know that some of the toughest days I have with my kids is when our daily routine is off, and the routine has been off for the last few months, right? Everybody is adjusting to that new normal. So with school starting, figuring out a routine and a consistent schedule is going to be really important to success. Sorry. Excuse me. It won't only help your child to know what to expect, but many of us are in a situation where we're relying on multiple caregivers to help us make it through each day. So that schedule gives a way for parents, grandparents, neighbors, babysitters, or maybe even older siblings that are helping out to all be on the same page. Whether you have one child or you have 4 kids like we do, I know that there's a lot to consider when arranging a schedule. So when I was sitting down with my husband right before we started, we were looking at, all the different schedules and things that were going on. And so the first thing that we did was we looked at when are the live sessions that our kids have with their teachers. We knew those were the times that our kids were going to need to be on their technology, that they were going to need to be in class. And once we knew when their live sessions were, then we worked around those live sessions to schedule in blocks of time for our kids to complete their work. And we knew it was really important to not just schedule one big long block of time, but to take those blocks and break them up into manageable chunks. Once we had our live learning scheduled, and then we also had our chunks of time to complete work, the next thing that we added in were breaks, lunch, quiet time, free play with appropriate choices, so that we could build out our whole daily schedule in a way that allowed the kids to have a balance between live sessions, doing work, and getting in those breaks and wiggles that they really need, but also providing a consistent and routine daily schedule. The other thing that we did was we involved our kids in creating our schedule. We asked them things like, would you rather have 2 times to do your work in the morning or 2 times to do your work in the afternoon? Would you rather do your work before you meet with your teacher, or would you rather do your work after you meet with your teacher? We also want you to keep in mind that when we think about a school day as a parent, we usually think about it as being a 6-hour day, right? We drop our kids off at 8 and we pick them up at 2. But keep in mind that even though a normal school day is 6 hours, we're not always busy at school learning for 6 full hours, right? There's things in the middle of our day, such as lining up, transitions, going to lunch. All of those things take up parts of the day. So don't be concerned when your school day doesn't go back to back to back with learning from 8 till 2 in the afternoon. And then finally, While we are thinking about setting routine and structure to set up our schedule for the whole school year, start thinking now about your after-school routine. If we get into the habit now of completing homework or having quiet time with reading before we have to go to sports practice, then when those events are actually able to happen, your child will be ready to do those things too. The other thing that I want to share with you, another idea, is this idea of strategic scheduling. And when we talk about strategic scheduling, it's the idea of making sure how you can get your schedules to sync up or how you can get your schedules to work together. And one way to do this is by trying to schedule your lunch and daily breaks at the same time as your kid. We know that kids are craving and seeking attention, and many are doing that even more so now. So if you have the flexibility to schedule your lunch break when your children are having their lunch break, it gives you the chance to interact, to connect, maybe see if they're stuck on something or have questions. And if you're working outside of the home, it might also give you a time, that you can check in when they're not in a live session. Also think about if there's a way within your schedules to coordinate that noisy work time and then have more quiet time. I mentioned that my husband teaches band, and so I know, some of my kids' teachers probably appreciate when he's not doing that in the background. And we know it's not always possible to coordinate schedules, but it's something to think about and consider. And then the other piece when you're thinking about strategically setting up your schedule is, how do I build in boundaries so that everybody can work to get their needs met? There's always one child that finishes really quickly, so what can I have for them to do if they get done quickly? There's another child who might take a little bit longer, so how can I work in opportunities for them to catch up on their learning? And then there's always that kid that needs just a little bit of extra motivation to help get their work done, which we'll focus on more when we meet next week. And once you've spent all this time looking at the logistics and organizing and making your schedule, you want to make sure that it's going to actually get used. So one way to do this is to work to color code your schedule. And depending on the age of the kids that you have at home is to use visuals to make it really easy for them to see. So for example, on my kids' schedules, anytime that my kids are in live learning, their boxes are highlighted in yellow. This way, all of my kids know when they look at any of their siblings' schedules, or they look at my schedule or my husband's, that if it's something in yellow, it means that they're live, they're on camera. I really need to try to not interrupt them if I can. You also want to think about whether you just want to have individual schedules, or does it help your family to have a big picture of what's going on for everybody all at the same time? And then we also know we can, just like, when I shared the story of my workstations with my son and you needing the chair, you can have the perfect workstation and the schedule all set out, but you have to make an effort to maintain that schedule. Remember, routine and consistency are key. So you want to have a plan for how you can try to keep that schedule on track, whether you're working inside or outside of the home. One way that has worked really well in our house and keeps our schedule flowing is to have a timer. You might need a timer on your phone. If your child has a phone, they could put a timer on their phone. You can add a reminder to your work calendar, or the favorite option of my 8-year-old is to ask her Google to set a timer for her to remind her when she needs to go to class. You also, when you're keeping your schedule on track, something that you want to think about is, how do you monitor your child's progress and encourage your child to do the same, right? You might find that your child needs more time or less time to complete tasks, and then you can adjust your schedule to help meet those needs. You also want to see how transitioning between one event and the next goes. You want to give your kids the chance to get out their wiggles, but not give them so much time that you can't reel them back in from grabbing just one more snack out of the pantry. And having a consistent and yet adaptable schedule will help to support both you and your child's mental health and well-being during this time. And with this in mind, I'm going to hand things over to the amazing Dr. Jessie Harkins.
Thank you so much, Jen. Jen had a great amount of time to talk about what the physical environment looks like and how that works, but there's more to the environment than just what it looks like. We also have the atmosphere to think about, and in that, it's important for us to think about health and wellness. Now, All other school years have had us parents aware of symptoms of various illnesses and allergies that face our children. This year, we have one more layer to watch for. Remember, you know your child best, so be sure you're monitoring yours and your family's health daily, and find health information from trusted sources that you have around you in healthcare professionals in your state, your community, your school, or from your personal or private providers as well. There are resources available on the Centers for Disease Control website, the CDC, on how to protect yourself and what to do if you're sick. But it's important for us to take this beyond physical health here. Let's take a closer look at supporting mental health as well. We're going to start by recognizing the potential for stress and anxiety in your child, yourself, and your family members at this time. The potential is magnified related to this school year's changes, the social unrest around us, the pandemic, and so many other unknowns at this time. My daughter is an anxious child, like her mother before her, and anxiety is one of those things to keep an eye on. There could be anxiety about returning to the school routine, whether it's returning in person to a hybrid, new, novel learning environment, learning online, which can be new for many students, or some combination of models. But after that first day of school, that potential for stress and anxiety is still there. Even if there was not anxiety about returning to school, you might see stress and anxiety appear at different times once learning has started. And keeping in mind that while we understand what stress and anxiety look like for us, it might look different in children than it does in adults. So consider beyond simply them telling you that they're worried or that they're voicing concerns. Anxiety and stress might look like irritability, changes in sleeping and eating patterns, complaints of stomach aches or headaches. It could just be a change in behavior or demeanor, attention changes, or interests in things that they might have had interest in before, or new interests could be indicators of anxiety. For example, a child might become more clingy, they might start withdrawing, they might be angry or agitated, or you might see things that have gone away reappear no matter the age of the child, such as bedwetting or tantrums or things like that. We've talked about what anxiety looks like, but I think the more important thing for us to consider here is how do we cope with anxiety and stress for ourselves, for our children, and for our family members. It's important for us to take a look at some of different techniques that we can use as we go through setting up our environment, no matter what model of school that your family is encountering at the beginning of the year and throughout this school year. When supporting an anxious child or family member, one thing you can do is ask open-ended questions. Questions like, what questions do you have about going back to school, or about virtual or in-person learning, or about your friends and access to other people, or what new expectations are there? You can also just flat out ask, is there anything you want to talk about? Know that it is okay if they don't answer or don't have an answer, or say no, but do ask again later. Prepare your students, your children, your family members for what to expect, and that there might be need for flexibility. I say might almost sarcastically because we can anticipate that this is going to be a year of flexibility, and preparing for that now will help as we go through the year. Be on the lookout and address any feelings of isolation, stigma, or bullying, as these may look different in hybrid and online settings than they do in in-person settings. Provide reassurance and make a plan to support one another. There is a relationship between parent anxiety and child anxiety, and we would be remiss if we did not recognize that one can affect the other. Dr. Reif will talk a little bit more about this later on in the presentation. Consider buy-in of your child to have them help make a plan to monitor stress and anxiety as we go through the different changes that will be happening this school year. Reach out to your healthcare professional, local organization, or your school's counselor for guidance if you need outside support or you do not know where to look. We also have a multitude of resources on our resource page that has been shared by Dr. Maxwell in the chat, and we will talk about again at the end of the presentation. Sometimes practice makes calmer. Taking time to practice the things that are the source of anxiety can really be a help. Depending on your model, you may want to do run-throughs of online sessions like Jen mentioned when you're setting up your workstation. You may need to do run-throughs of wearing a mask if that's a source of anxiety or stress, or using technology both at the school, navigating around a hybrid environment, office hours with teachers, you name it, whatever stressful trigger might be going on, practice it so that your child is not encountering it the first time on the first day of school. A really important thing is just to focus on those positives. Bring up happy memories. Talk about the positives of their current model. One of my favorite terms during this time has been silver linings. Find those happy coincidences that have come out of this time that has been not so happy and full of challenges for many of us. Encourage social interactions either through video or other safe manners so that they can keep those connections to family, friends, and those in the community. When looking for sources of stress or anxiety, it's really important to break it down to the small steps. Plan out the steps that need to happen and take it one at a time. In our household, we are big fans of the movies Frozen 1 and Frozen 2, and I'm probably a bigger fan than my kids are as they're getting older. But we like to take a couple tidbits from that. From the first movie, if you have the stuff that you can let it go, let it go. The stuff that you can't let go, just do the next right thing. Just take it one step at a time. Another quick strategy I wanted to share with you for coping in anxiety that can be done really easily in the home is called grounding. And I have a plaque that my daughter uses when she's younger that can be used as a visual for students. And basically all it does is focuses their control and refocuses their sensory needs. But for older kids, you can also take the time to have them focus on something different to reset their mood. And all it is just pausing, focusing on something else, and it kind of resets the scenario so you're less anxious. When they are anxious, listen to those concerns. It's okay to give a little extra right now. A little extra love, a little extra attention, it goes a long way. In a recent New York Times article, Dr. Russell Burr, a pulmonologist from UCLA Health, reminds us trying to preserve some sense of normalcy is really important for people's well-being. And right now, we're all looking for that sense of normalcy. Keep regular routines and schedules, as Jen mentioned, as much as possible, and help create new ones in the new environment that you're encountering. Provide age-appropriate facts about what's happened. This can help alleviate some stress and anxiety as well. Depending on your child, this may also include providing information about what could happen in a reassuring way. For example, that we as a family have a plan. If someone gets sick, this is what's going to happen. It might provide some reassurance, but again, it's very child-specific. It depends on if that seems to be helpful. It is normal for us all to feel sad, stressed, confused, scared, angry, or other ways during a crisis. And if you're like me, sometimes I feel all of them in one day. Talking to people that you trust can help. Contact friends or family or a school or health professional that you trust as well. Most importantly, take care of the captain so the ship stays afloat. Can you tell I'm a daughter of 2 Navy veterans? That's one that my mom always tells me, and I keep to it. It's very important to grant yourself grace, to know that it might not look like it always does, but salvaging the comfortable normals can really help. Give yourself grace to not have it perfect or even live up to your expectations, and take the time to laugh at that meme or that joke and reset. Encourage all in your household to maintain a healthy lifestyle, which includes proper diet, sleep, exercise, and social contacts with loved ones. Maybe even an email, a video conference, whatever you have at your fingertips. In these challenging times, these are the resources. There are resources that are available to support food and housing needs if you need them. Again, those resources are on our website, and we will be sharing that throughout the presentation and at the end as well. We will definitely want to make an effort to be sure that we're reaching out to those around us if you're able to support as well for those things. So we've talked a little bit about coping with stress and anxiety. Let's take a look at something that can be part of the academic routine for our kids. These are things that support health and wellness, and they build right into the day. Brain breaks are just what they sound like. They're time in between focused teaching activities, and they're used within classrooms across the country, and they can definitely be incorporated into different formats of learning, from at-home learning to hybrid learning. Brain breaks can include either physical activities or relaxing, quiet activities. And they work to bring oxygen to the brain, and they do some really wonderful things as well, like reduce frustration, promote focus and attention, and they allow for processing time. Many schools use sites like gonoodle.com or various meditation sites to build in classroom brain breaks. Those are also on our website for reference, but you don't have to access them virtually. You can create your own. It's definitely okay to design your own brain breaks, whether they're physical activity or relaxation. Even just taking a step outside, that's one of my favorites in our household. We love to just take a minute, step outside, feel the sunshine, and walk back in just as a reset. Deep breathing can be a brain break. Having an impromptu dance party is another way to do it. We will share more of those resources as well, but get creative. This is your time to shine. While it's important to pre-plan brain breaks during the day, it's also important to allow some flexibility if a clear break is needed based on your child's behavior. When a child is taking a brain break, be sure to set some ground rules. You want to make sure that you're setting the duration that they're in that break so they don't just stay in it for the rest of the day. Have an idea of what to do next so that they know what's next on their schedule. And that's where those schedules Jen talked about really come in handy. You can really just plan them right in and have a list of things that they can do next or exactly what is scheduled next on that schedule. Follow any house rules that you might have for brain breaks. You know, if there are specific things you want to make sure that are happening, that they don't get a snack, or they do get a snack, or that's the time to use the restroom. That is totally up to your family how you want to set it up. And also consider etiquette for whatever else is going on inside the house at the time when students are taking their brain breaks. For instance, if another sibling is working on something in the other room, it should probably be a quieter brain break or one outside, and vice versa. Another thing we kind of touched on a little bit in scheduling and workspace development is the concept of flexible seating. Flexible seating is another one of those strategies that's been used in schools, and it can translate really easily to home and hybrid environments as well. It does take into consideration those ergonomics that were mentioned in the chat earlier, but it also goes beyond just comfort. While comfort is important and safety is important, it has a few additional benefits. It means learning from different positions. It could be sitting, kneeling, standing, laying prone, which means lying on your stomach, but it's designed to meet individual needs and learning situations. Now, I know we just emphasized how important it is to create a workspace for your child that's organized, and this is very important to have that organized workspace, but flexible seating options are for times of the day that might focus on other types of school activities like independent work, reading, physical education, or perhaps you do choose to use flexible seating at your workstation because it meets your child's needs while they're in video instruction. My son's favorite is bouncing on the ball, but it really could be anything from standing, sitting, finding a box. As you can see here, it's a very comfortable spot. I've seen lots of those pictures also going around social media right now. Repurposing that car seat booster, as Jen mentioned, using a simple pillow on a chair to have a little bit of additional comfort, or utilize any other space that allows for small movements, comfort, sensory input, and allows for that varying of the working position. That tent is my daughter. She decided when it was nice in the spring that she was going to go ahead and have that video session outside. And if it works for the situation, allow that option because it does have lots of benefits. It allows students to feel empowered by having some degree of choice and control over their environment. It allows them to choose where they want to work and with whom, more so in the classroom, but also in the environment at home. And it also allows them to change their location and positions as they need to. We cannot underestimate the importance of a good night's sleep or a little peace and quiet to contribute to health and wellness. And you guessed it, it also supports learning. Regular sleep is really important, both in the amount of sleep and the quality of sleep that a student gets. It's actually been linked in recent research to promoting the learning process. And conversely, if there's less sleep, it really does affect learning in a negative way when there's a deficit. Additional benefits have included increased cognitive development, health, and quality of life. So it's not just common knowledge to get a good night's sleep. There's definitely research that says we need to look at it. But when we talk about good sleep, what we're really talking about is good sleep hygiene. It includes routine, consistency and setting the function of the sleep area. And what I mean by that is if your child sleeps in a particular area, make sure that area is only used for sleeping, that they're not learning there, that they're not playing there, that is the sleeping area of the room or the home or wherever their particular sleeping area happens to be. And when I say consistency, consistency is key, but don't cut yourself some slack. It's okay for some flexibility or in the routine once your routine is set. In addition to sleep, those brain breaks that we talked about during the day can be the way to include quiet time or meditation into a child's routine, which can also benefit learning and focus. It could be a simple quiet break all the way to an activity or different types of meditation. Some common meditation options for children include concentration activities, movement-based meditation, using positive emotion or affirmation, discussions, or just emptying their head. One last piece of health and wellness I want to talk about today is physical activity and movement. It's a really important part of setting the environment up for success. Beyond physical education, a period that they'll be getting from their schools, it's important to keep it going throughout the day. This pandemic has meant many of us have been in our homes and sitting a lot more than we usually do. And some of us, it's harder for us to get access to the exercise that we normally do, whether that was at work or outside the home or even within the home with all the activities we're balancing now. So remember, just taking a short break from sitting for you, for your child, or for a family member by doing 3 to 4 minutes of light intensity physical movement is a great place to start. I could list long lists of benefits, but instead let's just talk about creativity when it comes to physical education. Consider plugging in regular physical activity into your schedule and routine, like put it on the schedule. Utilize that flexible seating and the brain breaks that we talked about so that you're doing 2 things at once. You're getting both of those boxes marked off and checked. I love an efficient approach. And also focus on making sure to enhance learning by staying active, because it does promote that cognition and that recall as well. According to the World Health Organization, children under 5 should have at least 180 minutes a day of various types of physical activity, and children and adolescents aged 5 to 17 should have at least 60 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous intensity. This should also include activities to strengthen muscle and bone at least 3 times per week. But doing more than 50 minutes of physical activity will provide additional health benefits. And don't forget about those infants and adults in your home, because they will also benefit by getting active too. So make it a family affair. Back to you, Allie.
Thanks, Jessie. So we want you to consider that what happened at the end of the last school year wasn't standard, and it won't look like that again this year. School ended abruptly for most in March. It was messy, disorganized, and driven by the chaos that was unfolding in a pandemic. Teachers were told to shift their entire worlds and adjust based on the rules and guidance which was provided by districts. This all looked very different. Kids and parents were freaking out. Our president this morning in his weekly address said he and his wife were wigging out, and I think that just explains it all perfectly. For example, with my own school district, they didn't offer anything formal for over a month because they wanted to make sure all kids had devices before they started rolling out distance learning. This was essential, but it also took a lot of time, often requiring parents to just make things up as they went along. In the US, there is a significant gap between those from high and low socioeconomic backgrounds. Virtually all 15-year-olds from a privileged background said they had a computer to work on. Nearly 25% of those from disadvantaged backgrounds did not. Also, there was grave disparity between the numbers of devices within homes. Having a device for all is very different than having one per family, where parents and children all need access. Another issue is having access to internet. Distance learning is very distant if you can't connect to the teacher on the other end of the line. Districts and schools have been very creative about how to solve this, such as strategically placing unused school buses around communities to serve as hotspots. Internet companies have also been providing flexible solutions. If you don't have a device or internet access, be sure to check with your district. There are many equity issues that need to be considered that move beyond technology, such as meals, clothing, and school supplies. We have lots of resources to share with you at the end that are on our resource page, which Dr. Maxwell has been sharing in the chat. Similarly, districts needed to figure out how to offer an equitable education for students with exceptionalities based on individual education plans or gifted and talented education. This slowed down many districts as they didn't want to exclude the specific needs of all their learners. If you are a parent of a child with an exceptionality and did not receive services, please immediately reach out to the district. They need to be in compliance with all individual education plans. I would just want to point out that it's really easy to think about just your own children, but there are lots of factors that need to be considered by a school district. We don't always see or think about all the behind the scenes work. Also, keep in mind that many teachers go into teaching based on their love of working with children. Most did not go into teaching because of an interest in distance learning. So I can't say it enough, please extend grace. They are preparing for in-person learning, distance learning, synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid, all amongst the chaos of their own lives. And many of them have kids of their own that they're trying to take care of as well. Educators are also struggling with how to make learning developmentally appropriate, especially for our youngest learners, who really should be learning collaboratively and with hands-on resources. Kids are really good at imitating what they see. It is how they make sense of the world. By trade, I'm an early childhood educator. I worked with kids 8 and under, which is really scary to me because my oldest is about to turn 9. But when I taught pre-kindergarten, I had learning centers that included a playhouse. The kids would enact what they saw happening in their homes. Observing this pretend play taught me a lot about my students. I would often find out who was having issues at home based on what they would do in the pretend house. I'm not sharing this with you to make you fearful of what your young child may be sharing at school, but rather as a reminder that your kids are always watching you. They are in tune with your feelings, emotions, and actions. It is really important to think about the ways in which you are responding to this pandemic and how that affects your children. I had a really rough time with this. I often found myself saying things such as, "Hurry up, mommy has work to do too." And saying is probably not the right word for this. It was more of a frenzied yell that would come out. I set them up to be anxious, like I was ticking down the time for them to work because we just needed to get it done. My feelings of anxiety were justified. I did have work obligations. However, my conveyance of this was not done in an appropriate manner. I need to remind myself that my kids are watching. They are listening. They are learning how to deal with stressful situations. I can either be a role model of best practices, or I can push my own anxiety on them. It is a choice, and we all need to be conscious of this. Interpersonal and intrapersonal behavior will be impacted during this time. Interpersonal is what goes on between people, and intrapersonal is what happens within the child. This relates heavily to motivation and behavior management, which are 2 topics that we will be discussing in future sessions, so be sure to tune back in. I bring this up because it is really easy to brush aside our kids' feelings or make them feel like they are not important, especially with our youngest learners. We need empathy for our kids as they are learning to recognize their own feelings and acknowledge them. Paying attention to their emotions is also difficult when we are sorting through our own. However, acknowledging their feelings is extremely important. And be prepared to be made the villain. They will most definitely make you out to be the bad guy. Rather than deflecting their blame, we know you didn't cause this pandemic. You can acknowledge what is making them feel like they need to lash out. My own kids have said multiple times that they hate coronavirus. This often comes after they are told they can't do something that they really want to do, like have a sleepover at a friend's house. Talking about their feelings and coming up with solutions will help. What if we set up a Zoom night with your friend and you can make s'mores and play games in your PJs? This gives them a sense of control in this uncontrollable situation. I ask you to be mindful of the words that you use with your kids. Consider some of these common statements and suggestions for restating your thinking. Calm down. I swear, anyone that's ever been told to calm down does the exact opposite. Instead, try saying, "How can I help you?" Rather than urging them to stop crying, acknowledge the tears and say, "I can see this is hard for you." "You're okay, you're fine." We say it a lot, but we should ask it. Are you okay? Stop yelling, which you often do while you are yelling, which amazes me. I do it all the time. Take a deep breath, then ask what happened. You shouldn't be so upset. Instead, say, "It's okay to be sad and upset. Let's talk about it." And worst of all is this one, "I don't care." Think about how that makes you feel when they say it to you. Instead, acknowledge that you feel frustrated too. What can we do together to calm down? I guarantee that every single parent listening to this has heard these words before. "But that's not how my teacher does it." It makes me cringe every time I hear it, but I get it. I taught second grade for 5 years, which was my daughter's grade this past year. She would tell me all the time I didn't do it right or that I just didn't know. And I guess she was right. I didn't know exactly how her teacher did it, and it was hard for her. Kids are used to structure and routine. It is what makes them feel safe and in control. So how do we solve this issue? With communication. Talk to the teachers. If there is something that you are continually battling your child over, reach out to the teacher. Ask how they do it. After a few weeks of distance learning, I realized that my kindergartner was able to get through all his work except his writing. No matter what, we consistently were not turning in the writing. Oh, and I tried a bunch of tricks. This is my field. I taught kids his age for years. I was feeling extremely guilty about it, so I finally admitted that I was failing and reached out to his teacher. She shared some writing strategies with me, and they worked. It was a simple thing. Whenever he had a sentence he wanted to write, she would have him count out the words on his fingers. Once he had the final number, he would start writing, and after each word, he would touch the next finger and recall the next word. So simple, but not something I had in my bag of tricks. I would suggest reaching out to the teacher when things are not going well. They need to know what is working for your child in your own personal situation. Things can be adapted to fit the needs of your kiddo. Nothing is set in stone, but if teachers don't know what is happening, they cannot offer help. We'll talk more specifically about this next week with our webinar on motivation, so make sure you tune in. I'm going to hand it back over to Jessie, who's going to share our incredible resource site with you.
Thank you, Allison. Dr. Maxwell's been sharing the link as we've gone along, but I wanted to take a minute to just kind of highlight it for you. This is a resource page that was created in collaboration with the Department of Education and Liberal Arts here at Ashford, but it is a flexible, evolving site. So it's ever growing with resources from the community, and new resources are added regularly. We're really excited to share our open source ed resources for you page. Here you will find resources and more detailed information of the topics we've discussed today, including resources related to materials, environments, self-care resources. You will also find technology and digital resources, especially if you don't have access. There's additional resources on there, various community resources, activities and resources that you want to do outside of what the teacher has provided in the curriculum, information specifically for parents and caregivers. There's also information there for educators and community volunteers. There's collaborative supports and social media support groups out there. There's questions that you might want to be asking your child and your family or your educational partners. And if you don't find what you're looking for, there's also a place on there to request additional resources to be added. You can also send a message to our Ashford email address and we'll get those added as well. Feel free, if you find what you're looking for or you find someone that might benefit from the site, please share in local places, school pages, and give access to those that might benefit from gathering these resources. Back to you, Dr. Farrell.
Thanks, Jessie. Wow. what a great deal of information. And before I get into our summary, there was one question or comment that was made in the chat that I want to discuss briefly. Is why is it so hard to teach our own? And so my background is in behavior management. My PhD is in serving students with exceptionalities. And I struggle with all of this, just like all of you guys. And it really is emotion. You know, we're not as emotional when we're teaching and we're in a classroom serving other students. And when we are you're serving our kids, it becomes a very emotional background. So why I bring that up is give yourself some grace. You know, use some of the strategies that were provided, and take a deep breath, and just know that we're all in this together. So that being said, in summary, there's some bulleted points that we want you to leave here with today, and this will be consistent with all of our webinars. Begin the school year in a positive way. So one of the things that I would say is that if you start off on the right foot, it'll make things much more smooth as you move forward. So we're all in this together, so be positive. Organize your child's workspace. Having an organized space for your child will send the message that this is school and it's time to learn. And my third grader sits right next to me daily, and so we make sure that he's organized. And I think that would certainly help you guys as well. So devise a workable schedule. Having a consistent schedule helps everybody. It helps you. We heard during the presentation, research behind having a consistent schedule. It helps your child. So think about that workable schedule. Organization is key, but also remain flexible. So conversely, life happens. If your schedule is interrupted, give yourself some grace and just do your best. So develop ways to cope with stress and anxiety. Take a walk, ride a bike, meditate. Look for ways to focus on health and wellness. Listen to concerns, reach out for help. And then the one thing that Dr. Harkins mentioned that I think we can all certainly use and give at this time is give extra love. Let our kids know that we love them and that this is really a tough time for everybody. So communicate with your child's teacher. And I realize, you know, in lots of ways that this could be difficult. Many of us may not be used to reaching out to our kids' teachers, but I would say this: if the school year is not going like you want it to, so let's show of hands. Is it going the way everybody wants to? It's not going the way I want it to. I want my kids in school with their friends and doing their activities. So it's not going as planned. So reach out to your teacher if it's not going well. And so also remember that they are doing the very best that they can as well. And then finally, serve as a role model for your child. It's funny that Dr. Reef mentioned this in having to reflect on some of the things that she does in her house. I have to do the same thing. And, our children look to us as role models. Negative, if we look at things in a negative way, they're going to react in a negative way. And that's not saying that, hey, we can't be frustrated or disappointed, but I will say this: if we can find positive in our current situation, they will too. So that being said, let's go to our Q&A. And so Dr. Maxwell, are there any questions for the panel or that we weren't able to cover in the chat?
Just a lot of tremendous praise for how authentic the presentation was. Really appreciated Allison and her honesty, sharing how hard this can be, serving all these roles. Jen, someone is definitely interested in how your husband is doing band online. So that might be something that you want to speak to quickly if you can.
Sure, I should go grab him from the other room, right? He's holding the fort down so my 4 kids didn't come in while we were doing this. They're using Canvas, which is a learning management system that we use here at Ashford and a lot of schools are using. They're starting their year with a lot of theory-based things rather than jumping straight into instruments to try to bridge the gap, because some of the challenges that some of their students don't have instruments yet. Some of them need them from the schools, and trying to figure out the logistics of just, you know, with like school supplies or technology, how do you get the instruments into the hands of the kids you need? And they don't want to start before, you know, they have the kids having what they need to be successful. But they are planning to do, you know, live sessions. We had to think about when we were setting up our workstations, where can we set up a space for my husband that is away from everyone else who's trying to work and learn, where, you know, he would have room to stand up and model and play his instruments for his students. So lots of things to consider, but yeah, they are going to do live instruction, and then a combination of really helping to teach, you know, music theory and, you know, fingering patterns and things like that through Canvas. Whoever had more questions about it, if you want, I'll type my email in the chat, and if you want to reach out and connect, I can connect you to my husband as well. So I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you.
That would be awesome. You're also going to have someone who already shared their email, would like to know more about your color-coded schedules, that you have touched their heart. So I'll be sending that to you so that you can reach out. Lots of people very interested in how they can access this recording, because they have other family members or colleagues that they want to share this recording with. And so we have posted that several times, that it's on it will be on the resource page. Just give us a day or so to get that posted there. There does seem to be a problem with the link to the survey, that the form apparently is not working correctly. So we've heard that from some different participants. We will work on that and then attempt to email that link out to the email addresses of those who registered as participants. So we apologize. It's a glitch that we need to work on, and we'll try to have that working correctly for the next webinar next week. And I think, Tony, you want to promote what that's going to be.
Yes, and again, if you have any questions, once that survey is sent to you, send us those questions. We also have a dedicated email that we'll post in the chat. The dog ate my mask at ashford.edu, and you can send any questions that way, and we'll get those answered for you. But future webinars, so August 19th. No, you can't play video games right now. Staying motivated through online learning. And I think as we get through the first couple of weeks of school, motivation is going to be an issue that all of us deal with. August 26th, and I'm not going to sing this, but this is the way we learn from home, learn from home, learn from home, supporting elementary students with online learning. September 2nd, scrolling and eye rolling, and I live this every day, promoting teen student success in online learning. September 9th, now the good stuff. What's out there to add to my toolbox? So we're going to have a session dedicated to just some extra resources that you can use with your kids to support their learning at home. September 16th, distanced but not detached, supporting students as they navigate online learning. I think you heard Dr. Harkins and Dr. Reef talk about coping with stress and anxiety. Mental health will, more than likely will be an issue that some students are going to have to deal with this year, quite frankly, and dealing with ways to support students as they're navigating online learning, and also maybe some strategies to support students with exceptionalities also in this environment. September 23rd, Voices from the Field. We're going to gather a group of educators, administrators, and teachers from districts throughout the U.S. to come together and answer any questions or really talk about what's happening within their schools and districts. And then September 30th, you've heard from us, what's on your mind. This will be an opportunity for participants to ask any questions of the panel, the Department of Education and Liberal Arts, and see if we can provide those answers for you. So what I would like to do right now is I want to thank my wonderful presenters, Jesse, Denise, Jen, Allie. You guys did an amazing job. So appreciative. And I also like to thank the team behind the scenes, Jennifer Fifield, who helped put our presentation together, Dr. Swenson, our president, Dr. Lafferty, the Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences, Pat Ogden, Morgan Johnson, thank you so much for all of your help and support in putting this on. And I know we were a little bit over time and I apologize, but we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. And so, and again, if you have any other questions, put them in the chat, and we thank you, and we'll see you next Wednesday.